Namaste. This is Maya Tiwari with another episode of Women's Power to Heal Mother Earth. A few days ago, we cremated my younger brother, a Vedic monk, who passed away from terminal illness. And today, I learned that my caretaker, who takes care of my compound of the last 22 years, has passed away. The only rescue for the heart, as it is today, is kindness. Only kindness. Please listen in. I want to talk about our liminal time, an understanding that is less known and need to be discovered by each one of us. In anthropology, liminality is the quality of disorientation that occurs in the middle stage of a rite of passage, where participants no longer hold their pre-ritual status or identities, but have not yet accomplished the status they will hold when the rite is complete. We have several of these liminal passages in each of our individual lives. But our society, in the way that our world has progressed in the past several centuries, have deprived us of our connection to Mother Nature and her cycles, which are in fact responsible for the created passages called liminal time, liminal transition, the liminal time in each of our lives. Now, on an overall basis, if we look at liminal, let me explain it this way, and it will be simpler for you to grasp. In the Vedic culture, my Vedic culture, for instance, we have a young man's coming of age ceremony, a time of transition when he goes from being a boy into a passage that gives him the faith and the tools and the power, all invisible, to become a young man. We have a young woman's rite of passage called menarche, where she experiences her first cycle of menstruation, and that power is explained to her through the rites of menarche. Become very defunct, most of our rites of passages in so many of our traditions, but nonetheless they existed for a reason, to prepare us for our individual karmic liminal time. I'll get to that in a moment. We also have a married woman's rite to mirror the full moon on the third night of this exquisite, luminous light in the sky. She mirrors this particular moon on this particular night at a particular time of year, just to bring wellness to her family and to her marital life. We have the rural passages of Rangolis making yantras drawn with rice powders in the front of each home to protect the community every morning. It is done. But it is for the blessing of the entire community, regardless of race, tradition, religion, and so forth. but the most extraordinary passage of all in our lives are those that belong to the invisible grace of each of our individual growth into awareness. And this happens throughout our lifetime in various stages, albeit we do not recognize them because everything has become so mushed over that we find ourselves grappling with our growth process, with our forward movement, with all of the dystopian ideas of modern society. We have lost or have forgotten our right to our liminal passages, our rites of passage that is sacred to each and every individual. There are other rites of initiation that belong to the community of the world, like the one we are in at present time with COVID-19, and with the despondency of a system in our politics and religion that is simply not functioning. But I'm going to concentrate more on our individual rites of passage, which I call our liminal time, because I want us to concentrate on what it is we must reclaim in order to benefit from the junctures that are so difficult to cross. Once we understand that liminal transitions occur in each of our lives, in a general way, the Vedas tell us that it's about 7 times in our lifetime. But depending on our own individual, personal, karmic content, we can safely say that each of us have different times, different stages, planetary influences in our birth and our ancestral memories in our birth that comes through us, whatever. The interesting thing is that each one of us have some liminal passage that we must transcend, we must go through. And much of it deals with endurance. But when we don't recognize these as liminal passages, the rites of passage, the sacred, seminal rites of passages, then it becomes ever so much more difficult for us to even understand what is going on. Now, we have these passages on a cosmic level in the entire universe. We have them on a collective level with all of humanity and nature included. And we have them at a personal level, which is what we're focusing on in this podcast. Despite the diversity in our various traditions, rites of passage has always served the same purpose. And that is to separate the person from their former group or alignments and prepare them for their new phase of life. But this preparation usually comes from a societal point of view, a communal point of view, a familial point of view, a traditional point of view, but we no longer have access to any of the supporting elements of community and communal and familial, because it's all just broken up into smithereens. So we must now reclaim it. Not only are we needing to reclaim our liminal time and sacred passages through the difficult times, but we must also now at the same time build a communal support in order that we can experience our liminal passages in a way that is humane, that is kind. My opening statement was that I lost my brother Shankar. Of course, the whole family lost him. He was 10 years younger to myself. He passed away from terminal illness that happened suddenly, quickly, and he was gone. And then a caretaker that I became very close friends with of 22 years because when you know someone that long, they become a part and a member of your family. He passed away from a minor, what was supposed to have been a minor medical intervention. So the only rescue for the heart is kindness. Only kindness. And when I say that our rescue is kindness, we have a difficult time claiming kindness unless we understand our own, believe it or not, our liminal passage. What are these rites of passage for each one of us? What is the content of it when we go through it? We know that they're extremely difficult for each one of us. They always have been, even if we had communal support, even if we had the support of our native traditions, even if we had the support of our elders and crones in our society, even if we had some spiritual support, which all of it has dwindled. We have very little social, political, religious support in the sense of the one communion, the one community, the support that we need to go through our liminal times. I'm not painting a bleak picture, but there's so much reclaiming to be done that we may as well begin to understand what we're experiencing now collectively. But have you noticed how each one of us is experiencing also our own karmic liminal time during this collective time? In a way, the collective time that is liminal and a passage for our entire earth has become a cocoon for us. In so many ways, I am told by so many of my students and people who follow the methodology of my work, that they are consoled knowing that the whole world is experiencing this state of, can we say trauma or state, but it's really not just trauma. It is a passage. It is a rite of passage. It is a liminal space, and we're experiencing them all at the same time. But within that, let us not forget that we have our own individual passage to cross. And each one of us is going through a liminal passage of our own, based on our own individuality, on what our past identity was. And now we don't no longer, those identities are all getting broken up, and they need to in a liminal phase time. But it's difficult if we don't know what's going on. During this time, each of us need to prepare ourselves for the future, but we can't think of the future. Yet during this time, we are not constrained, but we are, through our own fears and angst and anxieties. But liminal transitions actually is meant to do the opposite of what is happening now in our dystopian world. The opposite is happening. We are feeling isolated and lonely and angst and not and grappling for what's going to be happening. But in fact, the liminal time is supposed to be a time when we are crossing over, comes with its own set of angst and transitions. To learn a lesson is not very easy if it is a lesson of awareness and the betterment of our own humanity, our personal humanity. This is a time when we are supposed to be dissolving in each other and regard simply the other person and recognize all of us are in a liminal state at this time. Different processes for each one of us depending on our karma, as I said before, but nonetheless we are in a liminal state. So why have we such a brokenness of spirit and heart within our community? Because the word community is simply verbose. It does not any longer exist in the sense of its solidity. But nonetheless, the beauty of a liminal experience, first and foremost, is that we have a powerful impact on our growth. We are laying the foundation for the relationships of the future. But we are going through the rite of passage at the present time. But we are in an outwardly focused society, and we have relegated such extraordinary experiences or liminal passage to rote rituals, at best, if we remember these rituals. At present, as I said, COVID-19 and the exposures of the greater dystopian reality we find ourselves in, we're all going through the phase, through the grind of the collective liminal passage. But put that aside for now. It is ever present, except that it is ever present. It is the cocoon in which we all huddle at the moment. And let us just get to the rawness of it all. For me, this has been the loneliest time in my life this past decade, which has been a massive liminal passage for me. As many of you know who know of my work, I've survived death twice in difficult situations of illness. And once again, I found myself in that state where the liminal process and the length of years that this particular passage is taken made me wonder if it would not be so much easier for me to dissolve into the ethers with wings to go beyond, rather than walk the simple journey which has never been so simple on Mother Earth. But getting back to what we are all going through and what we need to do, really I do share that after the last decade of massive and manifold levels of transition in my liminal passage, I almost wish that I had dissolved into the thin air and sprout wings and disappear. I spent more time in this last decade grappling with my old identity while feeling disoriented and stuck in the present. But in truth, this passage was doubtless my most sacred of my entire life in this birth. Depending on the content of our personal karma, each individual person has to go through a specific number of liminal passages throughout their lifetime. That is a given. That's imprinted within the human psyche from birth. It is not negotiable. And it is not a test of endurance. Although, without knowing it's your liminal passage, you can look at it and experience it as a test of endurance. But in fact, what it is a growth sprout that requires the soil and fodder of austerity, of humility, and of absolute trust in nature. According to Arnold van Gennep, and I hope I've pronounced his name correctly, rites of passage, which is the liminal phase I'm talking about, have 3 phases. I believe he also means this rites of passage in relationship to what I am looking at as our liminal time. The 3 phases he quoted are separation, liminality, and incorporation. He said in the first phase, people withdraw from the group and begin moving from one place to another. And then in the third phase, they re-enter society, having completed the rite, meaning we've survived the rite of passage. The liminal phase is the period between states, during which people are in one place or another, but haven't yet entered the next goal, the next destination, the next order of reality that forms identity. But identity is secondary to our intent of accomplishing the end goal of rites of passage. The end goal of every rite of passage, which we can now say is our liminal passage, or liminal phase, or liminal time, or liminal space. The end goal is not determined by our human desires and creativity, and it is really defined by universal purpose. Your universal purpose upon this God-given earth. The phase is the time, the liminal phase is the time when all of the unnecessary can be plunked away from us, whether with the great passion, even without our consent. Usually it is without our consent, and it gives back to you a simplicity, a ground of equanimity, a ground without so much poise, without so much attachment to identity, to family, to background, to whatever. And I do now know my third time around, and this was the most brutal of my phases. I keep saying that, but it would not be true if I said anything else, at this stage anyway, of the journey for me. But it is so true that as we get older, so many of our ancestral memories and our belief systems and our ideologies and what we have used in the past to get us forward, so much of it comes into question. And that question at this stage of our lives, I'm almost 70 years old, and that question and I have lived very fully, a full life of many karmas since I was 16 years old. So we're looking at deeper reaches to take out, to unearth, to rid the unnecessary for the remaining days or weeks or months or years of the journey. And I know you understand this, because I know that at every different age level, those of you who are listening, we're going through this. In the Vedic tradition, we have a Sanskrit term called sadhu. And that is, you see the long hair and the ashes on the forehead and the big beads that many sadhu wear. In fact, they are homeless. They walk the streets. They have surrendered to the divine will that the universe and Mother Earth will protect, and that's the least of their concern as a sadhu. And in the Rig Vedas, it states that sadhu comes from the Sanskrit root, which is sad, S-A-D-H, and sad, the same root for sadhana, which is living in accord with Mother Nature's rhythms, and the actions and word and thought all being in sync with each other, in unison. But it means to reach for the state of enlightenment. So then, or to gain power over the material world, the inevitable challenge of a sadhu. Because sadhu is a state of being in a liminal passage for your entire life journey, and that is the dedication of these men and women who've become sadhus in my Vedic culture. But we as human beings are not asked to take the life of a sadhu, unless of course it is your destiny, your choice, your faith, your purpose. We are asked to simply ride the waves of liminal stage and phases as our rites of passage when they occur. And as I said in the Vedas, it is said that each one of us have a major 7-stage of liminal space and time in our lives. In my next episode, I'll talk about what those 7 major stages are. But please understand that it is individualized according to your own birth and your own karma.